So, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Actually, I wonder if they can see you there. I don't know because I'm going to be interviewed now regarding the difference between Vedic culture and the New Age culture. The differences, if there are any. So why don't you go ahead and we'll start.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, my inkling or my guess is that most of these New Age words that people are using, they actually have a real basis in the Vedas, although it's not often clear. So here's one thing that we've all heard is very common in English. I'm spiritual, but not religious.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, spirits. Okay, so let's try to give some reasonable definitions for all those terms.
Yeah.
As far as spiritual but not religious, which kind of sounds like the New Age anyway. If we use as basic definitions that when the way people use it, we're not talking about necessarily, the best dictionary definition of these words, but how do people out there use these words? I think they mean something like spiritual is a state of consciousness, sort of an internal state, and maybe even how you treat people. Like, in other words, your behavior manifests the way you feel about other people. Like, do you love them? Do you ignore them? Or just how do you think about other souls? And religious perhaps means like external behavior, observable behavior. You like in ISKCON, that would mean you get up at a certain time, you go to a temple room and you engage in a Mongol arti, or you comply with, you perform a certain spiritual or religious practice, ceremonies, rituals, and so on. And as we know, some people are very compliant with religious rules and rituals. They're just not nice people. And so obviously this distinction between religious and spiritual is not sort of an ISKCON jargon, just karmis being karmis. There's actually some truth behind it. I mean, there is, as I say sometimes, religious institutions or just religious people are probably have the greatest opportunity to be hypocrites. Because religious institutions or individuals make by far the grandest claims, like, we are connecting with God, we can connect you to God, we can offer you eternal life, you will become, born again, you'll become a new person, you'll be reborn as a spiritual person and all that. And then, so when people making those, at times, grandiose claims, they're making those claims, and then they're just like, they act like, I can't say the words here on the air, but you know those words. I mean, everyone has their favorite word. That word. So, in other words, they sometimes seem to be more arrogant or colder, just less caring than ordinary people who may not even believe in God. And so this is a problem. If you study the history of religions, you can find in practically every religion that was around long enough, historically great religions, find a lot of piety, a lot of real devotion, and then a lot of hypocrisy. I don't mean the same people are doing both those things, but so there is that skepticism nowadays. And then you said, just quickly, New Age and Vedic, throw that out, try to give some definitions. And New Age is kind of a catch-all term. It's, let's see if I get some. Okay, and I quote from the Wikipedia Bible, the Wiki Bible. New Age is a term applied to a range of spiritual religious beliefs and practices that grew rapidly in the Western world during the 1970s. Precise scholarly definitions of the New Age differ in their emphasis, blah, blah, blah. So the rest is blah, blah, blah. But so if I can venture here a sort of a rough definition of New Age movements or New Age phenomena, they definitely strongly reconnect with pagan magic, pagan mysticism. It's kind of going back to the roots of Western civilization, which are pre-Christian, pre-Judeo-Christian. And so that fascination with, I mean, look at Harry Potter. I mean, that's about as pagan as it gets. So, so Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all these things, they are distinctly non-Judeo-Christian. And so I think the New Age thing is, of course, it involves yoga. It pulls things not only from the pagan tradition, but going to India. Obviously, yoga is a big part of it. So it's kind of mysticism and mystic and magical traditions that are non-Judeo-Christian and come chiefly from the East, either from, and even in Europe, I mean, a lot of the magic and mystical traditions of pagan Europe, Greco-Roman Europe, came from farther east, from Persia, and some of them probably built in from India, or a lot of them did. So, and of course, they're popularized because nowadays, kind of this postmodern subjectivism, which also characterizes the New Age phenomena, which is that everyone has their own truth, and as long as you don't think seriously about life, that won't be a problem for you. Because if you seriously that everyone has their own truth, that basically means there is no truth, and there are only psychological states. There's no actual objective truth, which means that no one really has a truth in the old-fashioned sense of the word. So anyway, go ahead. You wanted to jump in?
Well, that was great. One thing I didn't realize, I'm glad you mentioned, is the pagan aspect. So the spiritual side has these pagan aspects. There's also the postmodern aspect. I think you're right on the money there. Now, it seems to me that in the Shastra, in our Bhaktivedanta tradition, we're the scripture, yes, the Vedas, we are should I say educated? We learn that we should be spiritual and religious, right? We need both of them, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I read an article by, oh my God, what's his name? Houston Smith. I'm glad I remembered his name. He passed away, but he was a very prominent teacher of world religions in the 20th century, and a friend of devotees, and a real gentleman. He wrote a very famous textbook, undergraduate textbook on world religions. It was used very widely, so he was quite well known. And so I was in visiting a friend in the Nashville area, actually my friend Gayatri, and in his house on the coffee table, the coffeeless coffee table, Vedic culture, there was there was a magazine called Tricycle, and at first I thought it was a catalog for children's bicycles, but then I saw that no, it was actually a Buddhist magazine called Tricycle, and so Tricycle. So, and there was he had an article in that magazine which I read, and I found it very helpful. He was arguing about the dangers of separating spirituality and religiosity. And so if you go with these somewhat, I don't want to say crude, but rough but very useful definitions, that that spirituality refers to an internal state, a state of consciousness, and so on, a loving state, and religiosity refers to sort of more external, observable behavior, rituals, vows, and all all the different observable behavioral spiritual practices. And he said that the danger is that if you sort of vote for spirituality and you think you don't need religiosity, then there's no check and balance. I mean, I can do any crazy thing and say, well, that's just external. Inside, I'm enlightened. And we've actually seen this. We've seen all kinds of what we lovingly call in ISKCON bogus gurus. I don't mean to say that all gurus are bogus, just that that's just one group of people. And the reason I say bogus, it's a harsh term, but it, if the insult fits, I guess wear it. But I mean, we say bogus gurus because people who claim to be gurus but seduce women disciples, which is criminal even in the ordinary sense of the term, like anyone in a position of authority, a psychologist, a lawyer, a doctor. And so that's like, well, I don't want to say epidemic in these times we live in now, but there was a major problem with gurus. In fact, most of the high-profile gurus that came over in the 60s, mid and late 60s, to America and were sort of rock star gurus, almost all the really famous ones did end up having very inappropriate affairs with female followers. And of course, the great exception is Prabhupada, someone who's absolutely had
awesome.
Absolute integrity and behaved as a real pure soul. So if someone claims to be a spiritual leader, and this, of course, East and West, seduces followers or milks them to get all kinds of money they can't really afford to give, for the teachers or the preacher's own luxury. Like there was one famous preacher in North America that said that God's going to call me back to heaven and I'm going to leave all my flock if you don't buy me an executive jet. So, stuff like that. And of course, collecting from mostly working class people. So if you say that, I don't have to follow all these religious rules, I'm spiritual, then of course, that's not a good move. Because just to add, because if someone really is spiritual, if I'm really in God consciousness, then I would not want to do degraded things. If I'm actually in touch with my soul, if I know who I really am, I am a pure soul. Why in the world am I all about the body? When the lights are out or when the doors are locked. And so it's just gross hypocrisy. On the other hand, if you have religiosity, people follow different religious rules, or at least convince the public they do. Or let's say if someone is religious, but it's just not a nice person. We've all met people who never met a religious rule they didn't fall in love with. They for them, the supreme collectible is rules. And this rule and that rule and the other rule, and they kind of punish people with these rules, like you didn't do this or you didn't do that, or you should do this or that. They're just not nice people. I mean, you can probably find like an agnostic on your block who's a nicer person. And so you really need to keep both these together, religiosity, because a really spiritual person will happily act religiously. And if someone understands why they're being religious, they will also become spiritual.
So, Goswami, I want to apply some Aristotelian Thomism here real quick.
Oh my God. You didn't see it coming. You didn't know it hit him, but it was Aristotelian. For those of you who don't understand, Aristotle, of course, was the great philosopher for, through the Renaissance and everything. And Thomas of Aquinas, as they say, sort of baptized Aristotle. He took this magnificent logical, philosophical structure of Aristotle's thinking, and he applied it to Christian doctrine. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I intend to do and what I've been doing. So it seems like we need spirituality and religiousness, and it seems there's also a golden mean. And especially in our society for Krishna consciousness, it seems wise and logical to err closer towards the side of spirituality because it's in our name, Krishna consciousness. We are aiming for this state of God consciousness. So while we do need both, if we don't exactly always want to be exactly in the middle. So the golden mean, it seems to me, is closer to the spiritual side. Do you agree with that?
Sort of. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. What we have to be aware of is to be sort of caught in a contemporary dialectic. And by that I mean, it's Newton's third law of motion. Every action produces an equal and opposite reaction, also called the pendulum effect. And of course, Hegel, the philosopher Hegel, applied this to his philosophy of history and said that history actually moves dialectically in the sense that you have a certain state in a society or in the world, which is a thesis, and then it generates its own, just like a pendulum, and you pull it so far to this side, it sort of creates the energy which pulls it to the other side. And so when a historical culture becomes a little unbalanced or becomes a little too much to one side, it actually creates its own antithesis. So if the pendulum's near the center, the opposite motion it creates is not it's only a few degrees. So the pendulum is relatively stable. So I'm saying because perhaps we have lived through a period in ISKCON history in which at least some of us in some places have seen a lot more religiosity than spirituality in some people, including some people who had positions of leadership. Therefore, we kind of get sucked into this pendulum motion where we say, okay, I can't take this anymore. All these people who are, get up really early and do this ritual and perform that thing, but they're not nice people and they don't treat others well. And they're not really compassionate. They don't really understand me. They don't really encourage me. So I'm heading for the other side. It reminds me of that song, Jojo left his home in Tucson, Arizona. So I'm, so kind of like I'm leaving where I am now. But the trap there is that we go to the other extreme. And it's a very natural thing.
Well, I understand, but this is...
I know you want to go there. I know that's not what you were talking about. You weren't talking about going to an extreme. But I think that if you live...
No. I'm saying when you fully accept it as kind of a trinity, if you will, where it's not just two extremes, but there's a third item there, then there's no longer a bouncing back and forth.
What's the third item?
The mean, the middle.
Oh, it's the balance or the...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that you're right. But I would just say it that if you're somewhere around the middle, that's good enough. Because like some people, for example, if they're not kind of strict about the religious side and they sort of slacken there, their whereabouts may soon be unknown. I mean, they may really sort of glide off the graph or something. So some people are sort of holding on to dear life for certain principles. Other people, I know myself, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, because if someone is following basic principles, they're not like a super sadhana athlete where they're, practicing everything, but they follow the basic principles. For example, Prabhupada, I don't want to minimize the importance of, let's say, going to a morning class or seeing the deities, but Prabhupada did require for initiation, which is a big deal, just two things: don't do 4 harmful activities and chant japa. And that's all Prabhupada required.
Yeah.
So I think if someone is, doing their best and is a good person and really wants to serve and wants to help others and is doing their best, then yeah, I think that's great. And personally, I would agree with you in this sense. I would rather hang out with someone. If I had to choose, let's say I was stuck for a few days on an island, and I had to choose between a person who maybe, was basically decent and followed basic principles, but wasn't like really great at all the spiritual practices, but was a nice person. And the other choice was someone who is very strict, but is just not such a nice person. Then I would absolutely choose the first one. So, no question. I would pay to avoid the second one. I would pay good money for.
Yes, I think I would too. So we agree there. All right, well, let's move on. Here's another common meme in like the New Age is follow your bliss, follow your excitement. So where does that come into play with the Vedas?
Well, what if someone's bliss is raping beautiful women? What if someone's excitement is, I don't know, like going out for a steak? It's, things like follow your bliss. There's a bit of imitation here. If you are a relatively pure soul, you've done the work. You've actually done the spiritual work. You're not trying to, take it all cheaply. You put in the effort. It's like if you want to be a great musician, you have to practice and practice and practice. And so, or take professional sports. When I was a kid, I was just really into, sports and, baseball players and football players and everything. And so, what I say is for every athlete in any sport, soccer, whatever, for every athlete that becomes a really, renowned professional athlete, there were 100 or maybe hundreds of other people that had the same talent. What's the difference? He or she really earned it. They worked for it. Or if you talk about people that have, let's say, basic musical talent, but someone becomes a great musician. Why? Because they earned it. And so why, someone becomes a doctor, someone kind of likes to heal, is a healer, but someone actually goes through all the trouble to become a doctor. So if you look at the nature of reality rewards diligence, discipline, practice. The real world rewards that. And so if you have done the work, if you applied yourself with discipline and dedication, and now you're a relatively pure soul, yeah, follow your bliss. But if you haven't done that work, if I haven't done the work, and I still have material desires, I'm still kind of into my body more than I'm really into the soul. Now, I talk soul because it's, it's good talk, but I'm kind of still about my body. And then I follow my bliss. Where's that going to take me? It's like, just to give one little analogy, imagine someone that has not really learned to play music. They just haven't put the work in. And so the person sits down at the keyboard or whatever and say, yeah, just follow your bliss. We're going to be running for the exits. So, yeah, spiritual life is like everything. You get what you pay for.
There are two things I'd want to maybe add on to that. So in the scriptures, we hear, we read about symptoms of someone who is in transcendental ecstasy and, Ananda, real spiritual bliss, such as hairs standing on end, weeping tears, and so if we have a very specific definition of bliss based on the Vedas like this, and we say follow that bliss, it seems like that might actually work for both worlds, the New Age and the Vedas. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, I would say, I mean, I follow my bliss, but with a caveat. I've always got caveats, I never run out of caveats. So, because what is bliss? Ultimately, bliss comes from love. Bliss, spiritual bliss comes from love. And so if you're feeling spiritual bliss, real spiritual bliss, not just something which can be neurologically induced, but you're feeling real spiritual bliss, then it's because you've discovered real spiritual love. And if you love someone, you try to please them. So the only spiritual things on the market are souls. I mean, what else is spiritual? You are spiritual, I'm spiritual ultimately, and God is spiritual. And so the spiritual world is a world where everything and everyone is conscious, where there's just enlightened, conscious beings. And so to feel spiritual bliss is to be deeply in spiritual love. And when you love someone, you try to please them. So how do you try to please a soul? You wouldn't give a soul a hamburger. You wouldn't try to seduce a soul because, I mean, seduce their body or try to drag that soul into absorption in their external body. I mean, all those things would be perverse and just total yuck. And so therefore, if you're really in bliss, to follow your bliss is to follow your love, which means to try to please God, to try to please other pure souls by acting in a completely spiritual way. So you cannot legitimately, even grammatically, semantically, you can't really follow bliss and end up in a materialistic situation. You can't follow bliss and end up in bed with someone else's wife. You can't follow bliss and end up, taking a drug. I mean, you just, or you can't do those things. You can't follow your bliss and end up participating in the brutal slaughter of innocent animals. And because following bliss is following spiritual love, which means love of your own soul, not your body, your soul, and other souls, not their body, and the Supreme Soul God. So if you understand all that, by all means, follow your bliss.
Excellent. I see another golden mean triad pop up in my mind. So you mentioned earlier about how reality rewards diligence and hard work. And so that kind of ties in with the kind of religiousness aspect. And then the other extreme, and here's another word I wanted to bring up with you, is manifesting. This is, people who follow the law of attraction, The Secret, and other new age things, they use this word manifest a lot, as in,
God, we were ahead of our times. We were ahead of our times. The Hare Krishna movement, we always talk about manifesting. But go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. So do you see how these are kind of diametrically opposed?
Yes,
like people who...
Yeah, the big flaw, the 800-pound mistake in the room with The Secret is that, as far as I know, if I'm misrepresenting it, please correct me, because I don't want to unfairly criticize anyone or anything. But as far as it's been explained to me by desperately enthusiastic advocates of it, there's no real moral component. In other words, Prabhupada used to have a little thing he would say, first deserve, then desire.
Oh, God, that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, so deserving is really what makes the universe go round. It's all about deserving. And so if I want to attract something, well, maybe I should first try to deserve it.
Yeah, I love that. That's a perfect way of bringing in the ethical sphere. And so maybe it's not, there's not a golden mean there. Anyway, maybe move on. Synchronicity. Here's another common word. Synchronicity, I've noticed it was actually hugely important in my own development, my own history, so to speak. But I don't actually know where to fit in synchronicity, how to even define it, and where it fits in with scripture, with Vedic scripture.
See, by Krishna's mercy, I have a dictionary here on my computer. The Lord blessed me with a dictionary. So it says the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. In other words, things just like, oh my God, like I came over to your house to see you and you happened to invite this other person that I really needed to see and you didn't know that. And so it's just like things that aren't, like not like one thing, my coming didn't cause the other. Neither of us, myself and the other person, knew the other was coming. So my coming didn't cause the other person to come or vice versa. And you didn't know we were old friends. So nothing's directly causing anything, but it's an occurrence of events. Namely, this person came and I came, which are significantly related. And so
Goswami, I think I figured it out as you were talking. Okay. So we know that the whole universe is one thing. So it seems synchronicity is a reminder, or it anchors us into that being in tuned, resonating with the oneness, that one thing. And what's the second part there? I don't know.
Should we take a commercial break while you're thinking about that? So I'd like to sort of throw something in here and then you can respond to it. Mm-hmm. That is, there is a sense in which synchronicity, as I just read it from the dictionary, the simultaneous occurrence, like two things happened together, the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. That's very important, no discernible, which means that synchronicity, at least the definition I read there, does not say that the things aren't actually related. It just says you can't see the why. Like, for example, let's take that example I gave of, let's say you invite me to your place and I go, and you invite someone else and you have no idea that we were old friends. We've been trying to find each other for years. And so we both come. You didn't know it. None of us knew it. So none of us caused it or intended it. And then suddenly we're all together. So in that sense, it's synchronicity. It's not synchronicity in the sense that, dare I say it, karma. In other words, it's sort of like, I think the word that describes what's really behind synchronicity is destiny.
Yes.
So when things are destined to happen, then the surface unrelatedness, the surface synchronicity is just the surface. Below that, there's something destined to happen. And so in that sense, there are no coincidences.
Right. And I think what my point is that it's not my point. I'm, kind of trying to figure this out. But to be spiritual, to be connected to our soul and the super soul, etc., we have to constantly know that there are no coincidences and there is destiny and there is a plan for us that's on top of karma, on top of that all those cause and effect reaction chains, but there's also, you know, divine love and a divine plan for everything. And synchronicity is like a major mechanism built into the universe, it seems, to help us go back. Right?
Yeah, well, actually, synchronicity really just means that on our level, on our human level, like, okay, you say, I didn't know you guys were friends. Well, I didn't know you were coming. So on the human level, we can't discern the cause. But on a higher level, someone does know what they're doing. And there's nothing else I was going to say, and I guess it's kind of rough, you know. It's like when someone yawns, everybody yawns, so you forgot your point, and I forgot my point. So anyway, it's I was going to say that, oh, I remember. You said about how you know, above karma, and the way I would express that in sort of Western philosophical language is I would say karma, which basically governs, you know, everyone's destiny in this world, is teleological. Because, in other words, telos, the Greek word telos, means a purpose or a goal. And so in philosophy, teleology means there are objective purposes. For example, if you decide that tomorrow I have to go and buy some fruit, and so you create a purpose for yourself. But in a sense, it's subjective. If you decide, let's say tomorrow, before you get out, someone brings you a fruit basket and you don't need fruit. In fact, if you buy more fruit, it'll spoil before you can eat it. So you cancel that purpose. So that purpose was subjective. You created it. You can, you know, dissolve it whenever you like. However, if I say that God created this world with the purpose, God created the law of karma with the purpose, and in this case, of course, as everything God does, the purpose is benevolent. You know, from the Latin bene volente, you know, desiring the good. It's benevolent. Then even if I don't believe in God, even if I believe, as some very unfortunate existentialists believe in the mid-20th century, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, you know, those existentialists, you know, they believe, you know, we're trapped in this uncaring universe that doesn't give anything about us.
Yeah.
And of course, they got it completely wrong. So what that means is the law of karma is simultaneously just quid pro quo. It's just justice. You know, you did this, you got that. You did that, you get this. And as you know, that famous question of Socrates, do the gods love certain action, or are certain actions that we perform as human beings, are certain actions good because the gods love them? Or do the gods love those actions because they are good? In other words, are the moral laws governing the universe, and that's what karma is all about, it's just the playing out of the cosmic moral law. And so are those moral laws objective? In other words, if I do this, do I really deserve that? Or is it that there's some deity, like in Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, they're just sort of whimsical, you know, adolescent deities that it's like Zeus will say to his wife, Hera, Hera, see that Trojan soldier down there? I'm going to wipe him out. But why, Zeus? Did he offend you? Nope, just don't like him, you know. I don't like his hairstyle. Or, you know, or this, you know, Greek soldier that's opposing him, you know, he's my buddy, you know, he's my bestie, he worships me. So what, and Plato in the Republic, you know, complains about this. I mean, Plato makes this super radical statement in the Republic, which if you can think yourself back to his time in Athens, he said that Homer should be removed from the Paideia, which was the Greek curriculum. It was a very famous ancient Greek curriculum, which was considered so good that, you know, all over the Roman Empire, people, it was like prestigious if you had a tutor or went to a school that followed the Paideia. In fact, the Atlanta ISKCON Temple, which is in a very, very beautiful neighborhood, upscale neighborhood, and then right down the street from the temple, there's a Paideia. They still use that name for a private school. So the centerpiece of the Paideia, the centerpiece of the ancient Greek curriculum, was Homer. I mean, Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey were not like Bibles. They didn't have that status, but they were kind of the main books that told Greeks who they were and, you know, what to do and all that. And the reason is, he says, because Homer portrays the gods, divine beings, as being basically jerks, you know, a lot of the time. And he says a real deity, a real divinity would be morally, if not, you know, maybe a supreme god would be morally perfect, and even a demigod, a deity, would be at least morally superior to human beings. And so and of course Socrates, who was the teacher of Plato, and he raises this question, at least, you know, Plato's Socrates, that is that are the rules we follow objectively reasonable, or are they just the whims of God? And so the answer is, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, that they are objectively reasonable. And here's the test you could apply. In other words, if we just accept, let's say, common decency, common morality, which, like, don't intentionally harm anyone, and sure, pursue your own interest, but be reasonably kind and generous to other people. Don't be a, you know, self-centered idiot. You know, live your life, pursue your interests, take care of your family and friends, but just be a good person in the normal, decent sense. And so, if there was no God, what would you deserve for that? Or let's say, for example, I hurt another person intentionally, or for some selfish reason. What would be a reasonable punishment? And so if you look at the laws of karma, they should be reasonable in that sense.
Okay, Goswami, I'm kind of losing the thread here. So
let me go back to my point of teleology. I'll try to tie it up here. And,
okay.
And you know, you can always assume it. So the point I was making about teleology is that karma is not merely justice. It's also mercy. It's also compassion. In other words, karma, you could imagine a law of karma where you do something and you just get the reaction. Like, for example, let's say someone foolishly, let's say someone's cutting a potato and doesn't pay attention and cuts themselves. They have only themselves to blame. If you have a sharp knife in your hand, you'd better pay attention to what you're doing. Or let's say, for example, someone steals from another person, gets arrested, and goes to jail. So karma is not merely justice. It's not merely quid pro quo. It's teleological in the sense that it is justice, but it is justice that leads to improvement. It improves people. It purifies people. It educates them. It makes them wise eventually. And so here you have, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but how does that connect with synchronicity as being, you know, like a level higher, as I said? Because, you know, that when I said that, you know, it kind of stimulated something in you, and then so let's go back to that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's your job to, you know, keep us coherent. So now we'll walk it back to synchronicity. Because let's go back to that example, which I'm really milking here. You know, you invite me and you invite someone else. Let's just, you know, go back to that. And so let's say it turns out that there is some good in our meeting. The fact that I meet an old acquaintance that I couldn't find, and it turns out it enriches both of our lives, maybe even enriches the life of the host. And so synchronicity, sometimes because we really have the distinct feeling or intuition that this synchronicity, but in a way which is promoting somehow the good. That is, it's not just because if things just happen that we didn't really intend them, and nothing really good comes out about it, we usually won't dignify it with the name synchronicity. Usually apply that somewhat, I don't know, laudatory word to events which seem uncaused, unplanned, but somehow bring about something significant, and often in a positive sense. And so I'm saying that it's karma, but synchronicity is not, because in a sense everything, but it's a special kind of karma. It's a karma which benefits us, and itself, it shows the generosity, the good intention with which God created the law of karma.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's move on to, here's one that's very funny. We've both heard this before. Old soul. And
okay,
if you've heard this, but it's the same idea. It's like we have this idea of an old soul, someone who, like, they're born and maybe they already remember some of their past lives, or they're just naturally predisposed towards spiritual things, and we call them an old soul.
Yeah. I'm eager to explore that. By the way, we're all Ananda Leela, she's sending some questions on Facebook, so eventually we'll get to those.
Yeah, that's good.
I'll give you a cut on those. Just kidding. So regarding old souls, here's, in one sense, it's absurd. In another sense, okay, there's some reasonable meaning to it. The absurd sense is obvious. We're all eternal. All of us are equally old, namely we've lived forever. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Natvevaham jatu nasam, never did I not exist, natvam, nor you, neme, nor all neme janadiva, nor all these rulers of the people. Nachaiva na bhavishama, literally, nor indeed is it that we will not exist. Literally, nor indeed is it that we will not exist. Nachaiva na bhavishama, sarvevayam, all of us, sarvevayam, all of us, atakparam, sort of, from hereafter, literally hereafter. So in that sense, to say one soul is older than another makes no sense, because we've all existed. We have all always existed. It makes sense in this sense. I'll try. Here's the sense in which, okay, you can talk that way. To say someone is an old soul means that for a long time they've been aware of themselves as a soul. They've been aware of the fact that I'm a soul for a relatively long period of time, and therefore they have been trying to work toward that ultimate self-realization for a longer time. So if you mean self-awareness or soul awareness, this person is old in self or soul awareness.
Excellent. Yeah, I could not say it better myself, and that's why I'm so happy to talk to you. That's literally perfect. I like exactly what I'm trying to get from this, and I know many people will be happy to hear that. At least happy to have a real logical, kind of more scientific understanding of this stuff. All right, so another thing that's super common in New Age spiritual circles is vibration, frequency, tuning in. These are all different words that have a similar kind of line going about them. So I don't even know where to begin here, but...
Well, I think I have a good point of departure.
Okay.
Punto de partida. And that is, what we find in history is that people tend to analogize human life to the latest technology. So that there was a time centuries ago when it was kind of sophisticated to compare the universe to a clock. And then, when we developed, or with the Industrial Revolution, to compare it to machines, and then you get the radio, and you start to get, from quantum mechanics, which studies the subatomic world, like electrons, we get electronics. And so then we start talking about frequencies and vibrations. And so it's just kind of a very old tendency to draw life analogies from the latest technology. And so I don't think it's a lot more than that. For example, we're talking right now, and happily, I think we really get along well in these talks, which we're both happy. Me too. Yeah, and so I really don't see you as radio-like. You look more like a person to me than a radio. So we could talk about like we're tuning in, but I think we're just talking, and we're having.
Oh dear Lord.
Because I was never really very much inclined toward mechanics, and I remember when I was in middle school, we used to call it junior high school, but that was a self-esteem issue. I swear to God, I'm not lying. So now you have to say middle school because the word junior could affect someone's self-esteem. But when, in those days, it was Palms Junior High School, actually close to the temple, Los Angeles, Palms Junior High School. And so they made us take shops. Everyone has to do everything. So I had to take metal shop, which for me, it was like punishment. Metal shop and radio shop. I learned Morse code, which I actually retained that for at least 15 seconds after the semester ended. But one of the shops we had was a wood shop, Mr. Brenner, wood shop. And so the whole semester we were just making these little ducks that were like napkin holders, like little duck napkin holders to take home and show our parents that they're, here's your tax dollar hard at work, because we made something you can use it. And so I think the last week of the semester, I had my little duck and I cut its beak. My poor duck, and I had to go to the teacher. But anyway, so I guess because I was never so inclined toward that. It's it has its dignity and it has great value. We all benefit from those who are inclined to those things. But so I never really was fascinated by technological metaphors.
So there's one common saying about this that especially confuses me, but it seems like there's something real to it. It's when someone says raise your frequency and then you get it. Or so let me draw a quick corollary. Is in most religions, ISKCON, Christianity, etc., we typically use the word purity. Yeah. You need to purify yourself and then you kind of ascend to closer to God consciousness. And then in the New Age spiritual circles, they'll often say frequency and dimension. So you kind of raise your frequency, you vibrate faster, I guess, and then you go to a higher dimension, which
of course, in a sense, everyone is free to use whatever language is meaningful to them, and I don't want to tell people how they should talk. But I would say that the metaphor of purity is ultimately takes us much closer to what's really happening. Because machines have frequencies, but they're not conscious. They don't love anyone. And so I think we can objectively evaluate metaphors by seeing to what extent they really, how many points of contact there are, how many profound analogies there are, and how many profound disanalogies there are. And so raise your frequency, I don't know what that means. I mean, pure, I mean, I suppose I do, but like purity, because if you think of water, you know, water's transparent when it's pure, and then it gets cloudy or murky or whatever when it's not pure. And talking about transparent consciousness, it seems to me it gets that because when something is transparent, it does not change the information that's coming through it. Like, for example, let's say I look through my glasses. These, by the way, everything I'm wearing here is for sale. Just kidding, that was a joke. So I was thinking of selling advertising space on my shirts when I do these programs.
That's a good idea.
So if my glasses are clear and transparent, then I see exactly what's there. Of course, it's amplified by the lens, or if I look through a window, let's say, if I look through a window, or the sky, when the sky is clear, water, when water is pure. So what we really want or should want to do is to see what's really there. And that, of course, we don't have to bring something to reality. We just have to see what's out there. And so if you look at the nature of the creation, we live in a universe of art. If we look at sand grains or you know, or snowflakes, or, you know, water crystals, we look anywhere you look closely at the universe, you find this super art. And so clearly the world is a work of art when you really see it. And people are a work of art. A person who's really in higher consciousness, who's a good, generous, kind, intelligent person is a pleasure to be around. And so it gets back to that old philosophical question of truth and beauty. Is the truth beautiful? Is beauty true? And of course, according to materialism, beauty is not true, because there's nothing but physical things, and values like beauty are not true. But when you realize we live in a bidimensional universe with both a physical and metaphysical element, so you don't have to, of course, we should try to improve the world by helping other people, but in terms of perceiving what reality is, it's already beautiful. All you have to do is make your consciousness transparent. I'm not sure, like vibrating. I think if my consciousness was vibrating right now, I'd probably Mark and Day here would call 911. I mean, if I really started vibrating, and I'd probably have to be on an urgent basis taken to a clinic. And so I think what's really happening is in fact, the word Shanti, Om Shanti, peace, I think the idea of oscillating, of vibrating, at least in the ancient wisdom literature, is kind of a symptom that you're really going in the wrong direction. Because when you're really in higher consciousness, you're at peace. There's perfect tranquility. Because, I mean, think of water again. I'm really going to, go with this analogy. If you get water vibrating, it loses its transparency. And so why would you want to vibrate? I mean, I personally, like, when you're a kid, you like to go on a vibrating machine, but at my age, the last thing in the world I want to do is step inside some wildly vibrating thing that makes me vibrate. I really want to be peaceful. And I would say, and according to the ancient yoga teachings, it's precisely when your consciousness is fully peaceful, it's like water, then its transparency manifests. Whereas when it's vibrating, it loses it. You can't see anything. So again, I don't want to be like the speech police here and tell people what words to use, but I think that the language, the metaphors, the imagery found in the Bhagavad Gita does the job a lot better, and really tells us a lot more about where we really want to go.
Yes, I agree. And I really like how, you know, you took this word purity, which is, I agree, it's a much better way of talking about these things as they are, but taking the word purity and kind of thinking it more as transparent consciousness and to bring about peace, that's much more real to what we're doing in a spiritual life. I want to share just one thing about the frequency thing, because it's music. So I've noticed this very vividly. That's a visual word, but very strongly. A few times in my life, I would listen to a song, and it kind of took over me.
Of course.
Yeah, and sometimes this is really good, and I can literally feel myself kind of growing from just a few minutes of, these musical sound vibrations, whatever. Another time this happened, I saw the apocalypse, and it was an incredibly powerful mystical experience from just listening to a song. So,
Oh yeah, music's a really part of my life. I just posted some music, kind of my neo baroque music, just an hour or two ago. But I yeah, at times in my life when I've really been stressed, I mean, try being a leader in a religious institution. So sometimes I just spend hours. I play keyboard. I especially like Handel, you know, Georg Friedrich Handel and Bach and other people. And so sometimes I would just spend hours just really absorbing myself. And I think, personally, I think the Baroque is, which came right after Lord Chaitanya, by the way, is, I mean, even historically, it's a historical fact. It was, in a sense, the most God-conscious, great period of Western music, of popular music. I mean, you can talk about the Renaissance and about the medieval music, which was just explicitly religious music. But in terms of music, which also was, really, which was musicologically sophisticated and really concerned with, giving people a good time, musically, but at the same time being very profound. But see, another thing I wanted to say, actually, before I forget it, maybe I did forget it, is that like higher frequency, because I really, I compose music and I play music. In terms of musicology, I wouldn't understand what that means to go to a higher frequency. Because let's say, for example, on a piano, you have chords, you have strings, or a violin, and sometimes you want, like a higher note, and sometimes you want a lower note. And so it's not a universal truth that in music you always want to go to a higher frequency. It's just so as a going to my musical side, I don't understand what that would mean, going to a higher musical frequency.
To me, it's not that the music, this is why it's really hard to talk about this stuff, right? But yeah, it's not the music that goes to a higher frequency, because if it was, then it would just be just be like a really high-pitched sound. And
oh yeah, your windows would shatter.
Yeah, exactly. But what's happening is it's something about our consciousness, our soul, that kind of resonates with the music. And so
I know, but
think about it.
I just think, I mean, again, I'm not the language police here, but I just think it's not the happiest metaphor anyone ever came up with. Frequency means the rate at which something occurs or is repeated. How frequent is it? Over a particular period of time or a given sample, the rate at which a vibration occurs that constitutes a wave. So I in terms of higher frequency, I just think it's sort of it sounded good to a lot of people on closer examination, not a great metaphor. And I think if people talk about purity, they might actually make more spiritual progress. Could I just read quickly some questions here that we've got on Facebook?
Sure.
Is astrology a kind of synchronicity?
Oh, beautiful. That's a good one.
So whoever wrote that, you know, we like your question. Vedic astrology is quite accurate. I would say astrology, and this is something people don't understand, I think, in my humble view, and I'll probably, can get a lot of people dislike me by saying this. So if you're one of them, I didn't mean it. Anyway, it seems to me that there's a popular misunderstanding in that whole area of gemology and astrology, and you need to do this or that. And that is, the stars don't actually cause anything. They're not causal. It's just information. It's just information. It's like, let's say you get a letter in the mail saying that you now owe this money, or you've been admitted to a prestigious college. The letter didn't admit you. But people, if you think about common psychology, let's say someone applied to a prestigious college and they're waiting for the answer. And they're to open it. Of course, you already know, because if you get a big fat envelope, you got in. If you get a thin envelope, one thin little envelope, you didn't get it because you got in. There's all kinds of forms to fill out. But anyway, let's say you're waiting, and so if someone could say, "Oh, I dread the letter coming," but the letter is just some dead matter. It's just paper and ink and glue, to close the envelope. And so the stars just give you information. It's information. And so the information, like let's say that you will live a long life, to give a typical thing. The fact that the stars are telling you that, the stars are not causing you to have a long life. What's causing you to have a long life is your own previous behavior. And so I think there's a sense in which astrology, and by the way, there's a reason why at different times Roman emperors drove all the astrologers out of Rome, even though astrology is a big part of their culture. So it kind of, I think that astrology, misunderstood as it often is, kind of irrationalizes the universe. Because with the law of karma, we live in a fully reasonable, rational universe where you get what you deserve, and this is going to happen because it's the right thing, because it's fair, because it's reasonable. And with astrology, it's like, okay, it's almost like I had this karma, but if I wear a certain stone, it won't happen. And someone could say, well, part of my karma was to wear the stone. That was also my karma to neutralize the reaction. But I don't believe that God or the universe rewards people just for, because if you put a certain stone on your finger, let's say, or you wear a stone because you want to avoid something, that did not morally improve you. I mean, there's nothing virtuous about using this stone or, performing some ritual. There's nothing virtuous about it. And my understanding of Bhagavad Gita is that there absolutely is justice in the universe. In fact, Krishna says in those famous verses in chapter 4 why he comes to the world at all, and he says dharma sangstapanartaya, to establish justice, because the Sanskrit word dharma, and some devotees think it means a religious institution, but that's not what it means. Well, it means many things, but dharma is the Sanskrit word for justice. And so, I mean, there are other words, but that's one of the main words. And so Krishna says, I come to restore justice in the world. I come at a time when the world is being taken over by injustice. And so Krishna says, I reciprocate with everyone as you approach me. So it really determines, because Krishna is everything in a sense, in the sense that the physical universe is his physical energy, is external energy. We souls are his internal energy. In that sense, Krishna says, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. When someone really becomes wise, they see that Vasudeva, Krishna is everything. Arjuna says to Krishna, Sarvam samapnoshi tatosi sarvam. You encompass everything, therefore you are everything. And so, therefore, And that's why Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita that Jejata mam prapadyate tam sataiva bhajamyaham mama vart manu vartante manusha parta sarvasya. That people in all respects, human beings, follow my path. And so if at the latest count, most human beings currently alive on earth are not in the Hare Krishna movement, or any similar movement, may not be ISKCON. And so what does Krishna mean when he says that all human beings are following my path? What does he mean? I think what he means philosophically there is that whatever you choose, let's say you choose atheism, but you could not choose atheism if you didn't have a brain. I mean, colloquially, you could say you have no brain, but in the anatomical sense, in the physiological, neurological sense, you cannot be an atheist unless you have a brain to think atheism. And Krishna made the brain. And Krishna says in the Gita, Mataksmitir Jnanam Apohanam Tam. From me comes memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So when you choose atheism, you are simply choosing to reciprocate with God in that way. In other words, because the universe is God in a sense, as Krishna explains in chapter 9, the universe is and isn't God. And so if you choose that and you say, no, all that exists is the physical universe, but the physical universe is part of Krishna. So you are still, in other words, because Krishna is everything, you cannot exist and not be relating to God in some way. If you relate to God in his manifestation of a physical universe, okay, that's your choice. If you, let's say, are a philosopher or a mystic, whatever you're doing, you are reciprocating with or reacting to, responding to, dealing with, experiencing some aspect of God's existence. And Krishna reciprocates. So if you, let's say, go to your local gemologist and you think that a gem will stop you from suffering or do something beneficial, or otherwise you wouldn't pay your money for, then, but there's nothing about that act which makes you more virtuous. And ultimately the reactions we get are in obedience to moral laws. There's actually two things operating in karma. One is moral. Another thing is karma just kind of respects your preferences. Like, let's say you really want to be a baseball player. So maybe your next life, you're born with a dad that goes out to the park and throws the ball around with you because, you were a little bit pious. So there's a neutral area of karma where you get reactions which aren't really about virtue or sin. It's just about you sort of picking what flavors you like, flavors of life flavors. But then there's another aspect which is moral. It's the moral law. And so you don't suffer because of neutral choices. Like if you say that I like this house better than that house, or this song better than that song, and let's say the songs or the houses, or maybe if you like songs that talk about raping women and killing policemen, that may be a problem karmically. But let's say like I like apples, okay, you like bananas, or I like this music, you like that music, but they're both kind of the same type of music morally. But when you suffer, it's because of a moral issue. It's not because of a sort of a neutral preference for this or that on the same level. And so therefore people usually wear stones, not because, I like vanilla, but what would it be like to eat pistachio and really like it, pistachio ice cream? So my gemologist told me to wear this stone because it will develop in me, sort of a taste for pistachio. No, that's not why people wear stones. It's not why people do all these astrological rituals. They do it because they don't want to suffer or they want success. But suffering and success are results of how you interact with the universal moral law, and there's nothing moral about buying a stone. And so therefore, what I'm saying is all these things that people do are not really addressing the root cause of happiness and distress. And so in that sense, anyway, I went on. Let me read another question, if I could. How to stay detached from negativity in relationships, which we want to work out, but it doesn't work the way we want. Be neutral is the option. Krishna consciousness, one-stop shopping. It's sort of like the big psychological Walmart. Of course, that's not the analogy a lot of people like. But what I mean to say is it's really, one-stop shopping. You want to be happy. You want to free yourself from just unpleasant behavior that you tend to engage in, or unpleasant mental behavior. Become Krishna conscious. And see everyone as a spirit soul. See that everyone is part of God. Don't envy them. Don't become attached to them in a material way. Krishna conscious.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. Earlier in our conversation, you said something which was really well said, and you may have noticed on my face I went, ooh, because you're describing seducing someone. And what you're doing is you're taking this, pure, eternal soul and saying, hey, come down to bodily conscious with me. And when you think about it that way, and you really understand it and you get it, it's gross. It should really gross you out.
You are degrading someone who is meant to be an angel, who's meant to be, just a pure soul.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of what I've noticed, a lot of these negative relationships that happen, they shouldn't have even happened in the first place. A lot of times, not always, but when you're Krishna conscious, and you are seeing people as souls, the seductive stuff doesn't happen, not a lot at least, right? And
if I can merit, I just spoke to a very nice couple in northeast Brazil. The girl's parents are excellent devotees, and she's an excellent devotee, a disciple of mine. And she's about to get married to a very nice young man. And I was talking to them, and I said that the most important thing you have to do to have successful marriage, loving marriage, is never forget that your partner is a pure soul doing the service of a husband or wife. And as soon as let's say if someone's married and that person thinks, okay, you're my wife, and okay, you do some spiritual practices. It's actually, you're a pure soul, you belong to God. And I have the honor of being your partner, and let's help each other and let's work together. Let's be a team to serve Krishna. But that's who you really are, and that's who I really am. And so, honoring even if the other person, when two people live together, whoever they are, in fact, it can be guru disciple. If you're husband and wife, friends, if you're all the time with the same person, it's a challenge to really remember that I have to honor this person. I have to, because people can get on each other's nerves and so on. And so it's a challenge, because when you marry someone, or if you live in a Sankirtan band with another person, if you're with other people, to be with someone regularly and not forget who they really are. And so that's really what it's about in all relations, not only husband and wife, parents and children. Never forget that your child is really just a soul, that and so on. And among friends, between gurus and disciples, gurus have to remember who their disciples really are, and vice versa. And so it's all relationships. Let me see if I can, I don't want to say knock out one here, but how about the term vibrate higher? Yeah, that's I say it all the time. Not. It's like when I was young, I liked to go on those rides in amusement parks, and you vibrate, roller coasters. And now I think it'd be my worst nightmare to go on those rides. So I'm at a stage in my life where the last thing in the world I want to do is vibrate. I stop vibrating, and I want to and just be peaceful and transparent and love Krishna and help other people. I mean, not in the market for vibrating.
Goswami, can I ask you just one more question? There's one more critical term here,
yes,
which is hard to categorize is being present, being in the moment. So where does that come into play with, like, I don't remember in Bhagavad Gita if Krishna ever talks about it like this, but how would you, categorize being present within the Vedas?
It's interesting. The fourth canto with Puranjana story, which is an allegory, the beautiful girl that he's going to marry says to him when he's like, "Don't worry about your next life, just be here and now." Literally says "ihadya," which means be here and now. So, okay, first the positive side of be present. It is a fact that in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks a lot about falling into dualities and in a sense vibrating between, bouncing between. And so one of the dualities that Krishna talks about the most is pain and pleasure. And another one is, lamentation and sort of getting excited about things. So if you think about it, why would we think about the past? I want to leave room here for a good person and a good devotee to just, indulge in sort of a reasonable amount of nostalgia. I mean, it's not that we can't ever think of the past, because even Prabhupada used to think back with pleasure and nostalgia about happy times. And so but that's not what we're talking about. But the past is gone. One thing that Hollywood does constantly that actually is unreal and against science is time travel. There are no time machines in the Vedas. And because in fact the word for the past in Sanskrit is atita, which means that which has passed, that which has already gone by. So if you think of the word, so there is no past, there is no, even if Superman rotated in reverse very quickly, he still couldn't go into the past. And so there's no past to go to. Superman.
So, funny image.
Yeah, so there's no past to go to. And I'll talk about that, why time travel is so popular in Hollywood. And the future, it'll be like in Latin language, they say avenir, which means to come, the to come, Zukunft, Zukunft, in German, the to come, that which is to come. There's no future, it doesn't exist. And so what happens is that when you lament the past or miss the past, what it does is it takes you into Neverland, literally. It takes you into a consciousness where you're thinking about something that doesn't exist. And when you, and so lamentation is about the past. It's about lamenting for something. And or if you hanker for the future, there is no future. There's only the present. So I think it's the understanding that, and the word for future in Sanskrit is bhavisha, which means that which will be. That which will be. And the word for present is vartamana, literally that which is happening. So the past is that which is gone by, the word in Sanskrit, tita. The future is bhavisha, that which will be, but it's not here now. It doesn't exist now. Whereas the word for present is vartamana, which means literally, it's actually a present participle, which is a word functioning as a, anyway, never mind. So it's vartamana means literally it is happening, it is taking place. And so the only thing that's actually happening is now, the present. And so to be present means don't lament so much, or don't hanker so much for something that's doesn't exist now, that you forget what's happening right in front of you. And actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this in that famous poem, Adore, Adore All the Happy Day, where he says that, how does he say it? Something about, how does he say it? Do not, lament for that which is, forget the past. Forget the past that sleeps, and never, the future dream at all. Forget the past that sleeps, and never the future dream at all, but act in times that are with thee, and progress. And so being present simply means don't get absorbed in something that doesn't exist, either because it's past or because it hasn't come. And in terms of psychology, as we know, when people suffer traumas, it's kind of like a badge of honor, you know, like I was in the Hare Krishna movement, I have PTSD. But anyway, so the thing is that even psychologists say don't get trapped in the past. Let's say like maybe you had a bad relationship, but if you're so traumatized by that, if you're still trapped in that bad relationship, you can't recognize or embrace a beautiful relationship that's available to you now. Or if you're thinking too much about the future, you're not going to take advantage of the opportunities you have right in front of your eyes. And so there is a real sense that the acharyas recognize that being too much in the past or future prevents you from acting in the best way in the present. And so there is a Krishna conscious version of be present. But when people say be present, of course, no one's present now because everyone's on their cell phone. So, but I think, you see, again, it's like follow your bliss. It's nice if you know what you're talking about, which usually isn't the case. In other words, when you say be present, I would say, okay, be is the imperative. You're telling, you know, in other words, it's grammatically entails you be present. So do you know who you are? Because if you are present as the wrong person, you're not really present. You're not really present to yourself. You can be in the moment, like, okay, I'm in the moment. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about the future, but I believe I am the body. So I'm in the present, falsely identifying with my body, or falsely admiring someone or lusting after, craving someone else's body. So if I'm in the bodily concept of life, I may be present, but not as myself. I'm in the present under false pretenses, namely bodily identity. So that's another example in which all these nice little phrases like be present or follow your bliss, they're wonderful if you know what the hell you're talking about. And if you don't, and if we don't know what we're talking about, who we really are, then it's just kind of talk. And you know, it's nice, like be present, be here now, and maybe it's better than, you know, being trapped in the past or future, but it's nothing you could call spiritual.
Well, I do have just a few more terms here, or we can take another from Facebook.
Yeah, let's do a Facebook, because people send me enormous amounts of money from Facebook. I'm just kidding. So Krishna is all perfect. I'm just joking. I'm not doing this for the money. I really enjoy this. Krishna is all perfect, and we are part of him. So how could we have committed too much to wrong things to deserve to fall into this material world and feel too much pain here? Okay.
Original sin.
Oh my God. That was a bad theological move, original sin. Anyway, so Krishna is perfect. Prabhupada explains this perfectly, and we are part of him. So Prabhupada said we're qualitatively equal to Krishna because we're part of him, but we're quantitatively different. We are small and Krishna is infinite. So, but if Krishna Krishna has free will. Krishna, in fact, is absolutely free, because He's called Satya Sankalpa. Whatever he wills becomes reality. We don't exactly have that, obviously. So to be part of Krishna in the sense of being his superior conscious energy and not the inferior unconscious energy, to be part of Krishna is to also have free will. So how could you be God-like or made in the image of God? We're made in the image of God, not simply in the sense that we can have human-like eternal forms in the spiritual world, but also, and very importantly, we are made in God's image in the sense that we have free consciousness, we have free will, we are persons. I mean, if you think about it, imagine being conscious, but not having will, not having free will. I mean, when I just even start to think about it, it's like, it's horrific. It's like the worst horror movie. I mean, imagine being conscious, but having no will. You can't do anything. There's no question of freedom, because freedom means freedom to do what you want. But if you don't want anything, you're just, I mean, to me, it's nightmarish, the idea of being a conscious being and not having free will. So Krishna gives you free will, and I think that, this old question, how could we misuse our free will, is because you don't understand how godlike you are. You actually have freedom. Freedom is godly. Freedom is godlike. If you think about all the creatures, even, for example, the lower species, and I do not mean any way to negatively impact their self-esteem, but which is the greatest sin in our age, to negatively impact someone's self-esteem. But so all the animals, if you have any pet animals, those of you who are watching this right now, please take them to a safe space. Because this is a trigger warning for subhumans.
Oh, Jesus. Ooh.
Because if you think of the lower species, and not in an ultimate sense, obviously they're souls as much as we are, they're part of God as much as we are, but in their present condition. In the lower species of life, they don't really have, they're very much driven by instinct. They do have emotions, they do have feelings, we know that. And but they're not really accruing karma in the sense that we are. So it's hard to imagine, like, let's say a vegan movement among dogs or something, because they there yet. So therefore, the fact that we have free will is truly a godlike power. A godlike power. And you cannot have free will if you're not allowed to choose. That would be a fake free will. In other words, why didn't God make us so we do the right thing? Because then you wouldn't be a person. So that we automatically, we cannot, let me put it this way, why didn't God make us so that we cannot do the wrong thing? Because if you cannot do the wrong thing, you cannot do the right thing. You cannot do, I always give this example, like somehow I've been stuck for like the last 40 years with these same examples, because I always, in class, I'm going to do a new analogy, but I never do. The class is over, I just go and eat. So instead of,
It's okay, I do the same thing. So. Yeah, we're in the same club.
Yeah, so I've been giving this example for, probably like 3 centuries, that, let's say you're walking down the street and you have some money in your pocket, it just falls out on the ground, and then a person comes along, let's say a mother whose children are hungry and she can't feed them, and she picks up the money and basically saves her children. So that's a great thing. But did you do a good deed? No, you didn't, because you had no intention to give that money. If the woman would have asked you for it, or you would have seen her state, then yeah, you get credit for being charitable. So if you cannot do the wrong thing, you cannot do the right thing, because the right thing can only be done intentionally. Unintentional good is not moral. It's not You're not acting in a moral, in a positive way morally if you didn't intend it. You had no desire to help anyone. You had no desire to do good. It was beyond your control. You just had no intention. You had no intention. Then how can we say that he's a good person? He arranged to drop his money in the street at the right. No, you didn't. So God, in other words, I think the problem is, like, people ask endlessly, you know, why am I in this material world and everything? Why not just admit who you really are? You're a free being. You're a soul. Take responsibility. Stop trying to blame someone else for the fact that you're stuck in a material body. And, you know, and like if I was in, it's almost like there's this argument. If I was in the spiritual world, you know, it's so great, you know, why would I ever leave? It's sort of like, a lot of times people give arguments which are based on premises which are beneath the surface. And so to really evaluate an argument, you have to take these hidden assumptions and premises, bring them to the surface, and then look at them and say, does this make sense? So the hidden assumption or premise in that argument is that it's sort of like a hedonistic argument, that people value above everything just sort of raw pleasure. In the spiritual world, everything is so beautiful, everything is so loving, everything is so blissful, there's so much bliss, and people always choose bliss over everything else, which of course is not true. People, for example, if they love their children, they choose the happiness of their children over their own happiness. Or if you envy someone, let's say you're married to someone, I mean, not you, but and I've seen this too many times, it's tragic. Someone is well married, you know, a man has a good wife, a wife has a good husband, and they're just kind of envious of the other person, or they just can't appreciate what they've got, and they leave that person and end up suffering. End up suffering because they couldn't, you know, there's a song by Joe Tex. I highly recommend this. It's, you know, it's on YouTube. In the 60s, song called Hold On to What You've Got. And it's a great song. But anyway, and it talks about this. So people do act against their self-interest. Because it's you could say, well, if I was pure, how could I feel envy? Or how could I? But again, I think it's based on a misunderstanding of reality. Because in fact, let's say like envy, some quality like envy or lust or greed or whatever, even in very small degrees, like little minuscule, just microscopic trace amounts. It's not some substance. It's almost like saying, like, how could I ever get COVID-19 in the spiritual world? Because there are no, you know, harmful viruses up there. So it's almost like this idea that these material desires are like bacteria or viruses outside me. They're not part of, and they just sort of infect me. And how could I be infected in the spiritual world? But what Prabhupada said is, we actually have free will. You're a free soul. You are godlike. You are a little God. Maybe not the same quantity as Krishna, but in your own little kind of, your own little way, you are a God. And you actually have free will, which is a godlike power. And you make choices, and being in the spiritual world does not take away your free will. And so, and also Prabhupada said that when you know, after millions of lives in this world, when you go back to the spiritual world, it'll just seem like a bad dream. Now it seems to us like a long time, but when you compare the time you spend in this world, when you compare it to infinity, I mean, by definition, any finite amount of time is infinitesimal compared to infinity. And so, anyway, let's see, maybe one more question, then I'll be done with Facebook, and I'll never use Facebook again. Just kidding. What if there is a physical barrier, like a line that exists? These are interesting questions. What if there's a physical barrier, like a line that exists between the spiritual and material realms, and it occurs at the speed of light. And by saying vibrate higher, we are really saying approach crossing that barrier, because everything is waves, sound, light, radiation. Everything is Krishna's energy. And what if we can actually raise our consciousness to pass this barrier? Could that be a good interpretation? It's an excellent question. It's a bad, but it's a bad answer. I mean, the question was a very good question. It's kind of like doing all you can do for that language. So really, I mean, you can't do a better job of trying to make that language sound good, but ultimately, no, it doesn't work. And the reason is because, first of all, the way you cross, there is a barrier, there is kind of like the coverings of the universe, but you can't get through them like, okay, I'm just gonna like some kind of sci-fi thing where I just start vibrating at this ridiculously high rate. I just sort of vibrate my way through the barrier. That's not going to happen. That's not gonna happen. Because that barrier is not, it's not equal to high intensity vibration.
It's like instead of Superman going as fast as he can in reverse, he shakes himself as much as he can.
Yeah, he vibrates and just flies right out of the universe. Or maybe the Incredible Flash. But anyway, so no, because again, vibrating, it's physical, it's not moral. You go to the spiritual world by becoming so good, so virtuous, so pure, not by vibrating so fast. It's like, I'm a better person than you morally. Why? I vibrate faster. It's like, what does that even mean? So I, maybe because I'm not inclined towards all kinds of technical things, it's just I have no idea what they're talking about. And so yeah, the way you cross the barrier is and go out in style, and sort of like, Vaikuntha Airlines, in the first class compartment, is, we know, for example, the case of Dhruva, you become a pure soul. When you develop, when we develop pure love of Krishna, then you can book your ticket on Air Vaikuntha. And it's your pure love. It's like that. I think it's a very, very beautiful song that was written by Curtis Mayfield and sung by him and his group, The Impressions, in the 60s, called People Get Ready. Anyway, as an ISKCON guru, I'm authorizing you. I'm controlling all your behavior. So now as an ISKCON guru, I recommend, it's just a beautiful, beautiful song, People Get Ready. It's about going back to God. And it was a hit in the 60s. And so one of the lines is, there's there's a place for those who love the most. And so those who love the most will go back to God. And then one of the lines is, there ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who would hurt all mankind just to save his own. Have pity on those whose chances grow thinner, because there's no hiding place before the kingdom's throne.
Whoa.
And so I think, and that's of course because most of the best and most famous and successful African-American black singers in the 60s and 70s, Aretha Franklin certainly, and all of them, Curtis Mayfield, they came right out of the churches. That was gospel music. They, and the best of them, they sang these beautiful, beautiful songs, thrilling songs. So people get ready. There's no hiding place before the kingdom's throne. And so, again, this impersonalism, this sort of like, people are trying to robotize themselves, make themselves into robots. No, my frequency, my vibration. It's just like, why do you want to make yourself into a machine? I mean, being a free, pure soul, that's what you are. Why do you want to make yourself into a machine? And you think you can go to heaven by vibrating? It's like, what does that even mean? And so when you love God, when you love Krishna, you will pass all the barriers and you'll go back to Krishna. I mean, you'll go in style, in glory, in light, and in love. You'll be taken back to the spiritual world. It's not about, waves and vibrations. It's about love. It's about loving and being pure-hearted, because love means that I'm not exploiting you. I'm not trying to make myself happy by using you in some way. I love you. I unselfishly simply want your ultimate good. And I have to know what that good is. You have to know what the good is to love. It's not like some stupid parent that, here, I know you like cocaine, Johnny. I bought some for you today. I hope you like it. They said it was, a very good brand. And so, my mother, I had really great parents. I'm very grateful, actually, for my parents. And my mother used to tell the story, kind of laughing at herself, that she grew up on a ranch in Riverside, California. She was very intelligent, but she grew up on a ranch, and then that sounds like people on ranches aren't supposed to be intelligent. Anyway, she grew up on a ranch, and she was very intelligent. And so she came to LA, and she got married to my father, and she had her first son, who was my older brother. And so he got a fever. Babies always get fevers. And so she was kind of panicked. She didn't know what to do, so she just took him outside to cool him off. Because he was hot, so she took him out in the cold air to cool him off, which is, of course, not what you do when people have fever. So I was like, to love someone, you can love someone, but if you really love them, then you have to know how to help them. Like, let's say you love someone and that person is sick, you have to know how to make them better. You have to, and if you really love someone and they do get ill, let's say, then you tirelessly search for a way, like parents love their children. If, let's say, God forbid, someone's child is sick, seriously ill, the parents, they won't stop until they've found something to help their child. Isn't it? That's what love is. When you love someone, you just will find a way to help that person. So how can you love really meaningfully if you don't know who you are, you don't know how to help yourself, don't know how to help other people, and just say, I love you? What is that? What are we really talking about there? Just an emotion, an attachment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. In that situation, it's an emotion, an attachment, and not much more than that.
Yeah, so something that really amazes me, if you want to see the power of Maya, we'll kind of wrap up here, but if you want to really see the power of Maya, like Maya can really turn even a brilliant person into a donkey. And of course, I should have allowed the donkeys who may be out there to go to a safe space. But anyway, so you have these people like these atheists who claim to be scientists. I've watched a lot of these debates with the famous atheists, and I stopped watching because...
Me too.
They have no clue about what philosophy is. They don't realize they're making absurd arguments. But anyway, so here's a group of people, not only sort of media atheists, but also scientists for atheists. Imagine if there is something like a soul, if there's an eternal soul or God, you can live forever. Forget religion. We're talking about survival. And if there's not a God, you will not exist forever. And so you get these people who enthusiastically are inspired to argue that I will not survive. I'm so enthusiastic about my non-survival. And if anyone says I will survive, I attack that person. I don't know about you, but that sounds to me like an extremely weird psychology.
Yeah.
How can anyone be that stupid? Unless it's you can say, well, that's what I really believe, but you don't know. You don't know that. You can't know that there's no eternal soul. There's no empirical methodology. There's no way you can know that. So the fact is, you don't know. Let's say if you don't know, you're not religious. So It's like, for example, let's say, again, God forbid, someone's hiking in the mountains and they're trapped and their water is running out and their energy is running out. And let's say there's a couple paths you have to, let's say there's only one path that you can take. You don't know if it'll take you to a village, or you don't know that. You may die, but it's the only path. Do you take it? Of course you take it. Imagine people saying, no, that's stupid. Don't take the path. You know, it may not go there. Let's just stay here and die. Why would you argue that? I mean, don't do that. So again, if there's a soul, eternal soul, you exist forever. And if there's not, you are gone. You're dead, unconscious forever. Someone said in the class we did with Caltech, well, someone could say that dying is peace. No, peace is a conscious state. Non-existence is not peace because it's not a conscious state. They say rest in peace. That's, well, anyway, we know how logical that is. Like, yeah, you're really in the ground there. Anyway, so, but my point is, how could people with PhDs and, you know, so-called learning dedicate their lives to fighting against their own survival?
I know how. They're on a lower vibration.
Yes, that's right. We got to, exactly. So I think the only way I can explain that everyone wouldn't just grab the only chance you've got. This is the only game in town if you want to survive. It's your only chance to live forever, to try to understand if there's an eternal soul. If you try and you can't find one, okay, no harm trying, but you tried. So the only way I can explain that all these so-called educated people are enthusiastically spending their whole lives to arguing that I, the person doing it, that I won't survive. They're fighting for their own non-survival. I mean, I think the only way you can explain that is to say that it's Maya. It's illusion. It really reminds me of that case. It was the Brikasura, was his name, the wolf demon. The Brikasura that, you know, he worshiped Lord Shiva, Lord Shiva gave him the boon that whosever head he touched, the head would crack, you know, just break into pieces, obviously causing instant death. And so then he tried to touch Lord Shiva's head, which was like, you know, talk about bite the head, you know, like crack the head that feeds you or something. But anyway, so then he tried to touch Lord Shiva's head, and Lord Shiva fled. And then Vishnu came and said, hey, calm down, you know, your heart rate's going up too high. Let's talk about this. So, and then he said, first of all, Lord Shiva is just a cheater. You know, he doesn't really give the boons he promises. And so, you know, you can test it right now, touch your own head. So he's touched his head, and of course his head, you know, disintegrated. So broke into pieces. So you could say, well, how could he be that dumb? I mean, you could say, you know, how could that really happen? How could that really happen? Take a look at modern science. Take a look at some of these modern atheistic philosophers. They are doing everything in their power to argue, to show that they will die forever. And that's what inspires them. They get up in the morning and they're inspired to go to the office and come up with, you know, more and more evidence that they will die forever.
Goswami, I just want to share something. This is one way that I've been able to explain these sorts of things, because it happens a lot when I talk to people who I know are smart, like intellectually, but they just don't get what I'm saying. And so one way you could talk about it is they're on a different frequency, they're on a different dimension. But another, and then you can use Maya. That's better, that's more effective. They're an illusion. Another way is like it's a joke. So like a really good joke, you either get it or you don't get it, right? It's not an IQ thing. It's like sometimes, this has happened to me so many times when I was younger, because I'm very analytical. So I could like understand the words in the joke, but I just don't get it. And then sometimes later you go, oh, and then you get it. So that's one way I think about these sorts of things.
Yeah, no, it is. But unfortunately, in a joke, if you don't get it, it's like, okay, you're not the life of the party. But if you don't get the soul, the consequences are really bad. So, yeah, so it's, but even if, you see, my point is, even if someone didn't have realization of the soul or wasn't able, but how could you be working hard to try to see if there is one? Because that's your only chance to survive. So I think that's an example of Maya just making people into complete fools. So they're dedicating their lives to their own eternal non-existence.
Okay, that's maybe a good place to end.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this. I was saying to the devotee here, sort of joking, that you are the Vedic Joe Rogan. So,
well, I hope so. That's my material ambition. That's my marketing plan, and I'm going to stick to it. And I'm going to be very upset if I fail. And joking, of course.
I know. Anyway, I want to thank you. I appreciate very much that you invite me to do these programs. And also, I want to thank all the devotees who are watching on Facebook. I appreciate your watching. It's nice to have you here. We're all together. And so thank you all very much. And I guess we'll end it there.
Yeah, thank you, all the devotees out there. Those are great questions we got. Thank you, Goswami. Would you like to come on again in the future?
Sure.
That'd be awesome for me.
Okay, thank you all very much, and everyone take care, be safe, and Hare Krishna. So I'm going to end there. I ended the Facebook.
And one thing we can end our Skype recording with is V for Vishnu.
Okay, thanks again, and hope we'll see you again soon.
That sounds great. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.